Welcome everyone back to the Growing My Own Shutters podcast. We're diving in, man. It's so hard not to dive in. I've got an awesome guest with me today. Would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah. So my name is Steve Heath. I teach accounting and finance at the College of San Mateo. So it's a community college in California. I've been teaching for maybe 10 years. Before I started teaching, I got my CPA license. I'm accredited in business valuation. I'm certified in forensic analysis. I spent the vast majority of my career kind of outside of teaching, working in litigation consulting.
Wow.
So I valued intellectual property in the context of commercial litigation. So, like um, patents, trademarks, trade secrets. My students generally get a kick out of the fact that I worked on a case against Snoop Dogg where we had to try to figure out the value of the artwork associated with his first album. Worked
Wow.
on a case against Pitbull, where Pitbull used the trademark name of one of our clients, Revolution. It's a reggae band. So he used that word in one of his albums. So we had to talk about, or we had to try to figure out what the value of that was. So I
Wow.
did that for probably 20 years. Um, it was super stressful, and so
I wouldn't think so, man.
it was stressful, and it was very engaging and entertaining as well, and super interesting, but it was just too stressful. I was traveling through Europe towards the end, and it was becoming kind of a strain on my, marriage and family, so I decided that I needed to do something different, and I joke with students all the time that I needed to do basically the easiest job on the face of the planet, and that's teaching accounting at a community college. Kidding, but it's like I wanted to do something more meaningful. I
Yeah,
had like a profound life-changing experience when I was going to community college, and it just made sense for me to do it. So, yeah, that's kind of my background, and
that's awesome.
without all the gory detail in the beginning. So,
But it's awesome because it's like, you know, we all have our different journeys to finding our ikigai, what it is that's our thing, because everyone, no one's two paths looks the same, and this is the thing that I like that more people are talking about as well, because in personal finance, like, I get overwhelmed by the people who are out there going, and this is the way to do it. And, you want to get rich. These are the 5 things you have to do. And I mean, certainly there are things that you probably have to focus on, but one person's way to get rich is going to be different from another's. One person might be like, they work the stable 9 to 5 and they just invest well. Another person might be the person who's like got the side hustle and is flipping things or doing whatever it might be. I mean, I don't know, but it's like, it always looks different. And when we try to apply the same, cookie cutter, like, outline to everyone, it doesn't always work well.
it doesn't. And I spend a lot of my time stressing out about because I get that question all the time about what should my major be, or what school should I transfer off to out of community college, and so I stress about, man, like these kids are asking me great questions, and I feel like I definitely am passionate and I've got my primary advice, but at the end of the day, like, there really isn't anything standing in your way. Like, there isn't, like you say, there really isn't um, one path to the end. I've almost, as lame as it sounds, I've kinda come to the conclusion that if you're kinda passionate about the direction you're heading, that's probably the most important factor,
Yeah.
right? So if you're super engaged in your major, or like passionate about going to a particular school, or excited about a particular career, like, man, you have most of it figured out. And I think the rest will just sort of fall in place as long as you follow some general, like, basic rules about investing and not overspending and so forth. But I totally agree with you that there really isn't just one way to do things, and everybody's kind of on their own path, and you just have to sort of inspire people to, like, get excited about the direction they're heading in and what they're actually doing day to day to to hit their, hit their goals.
When I was I love martial arts and anime and stuff. So I'm gonna go on a tangent here, but it's gonna be a fun tangent. Uh, yesterday, I was doing a podcast for graduate school that I am still studying at, acupuncture and stuff, and I referenced Karate Kid in a acupuncture podcast about fertility. Don't ask me how, but I pulled it off. But this time, when I was in college, I was studying martial arts. I was studying Japanese style jiu-jitsu, which is really similar to judo. We had this kid came over from Japan, and he had been training at the Kodokan League, actually, like the judo school in Tokyo. It was the original school, and this kid was good. He was really good. And one of the things that was funny is like he came in, and my teacher had this obsession with teaching us lots of different techniques, and we were good at different techniques. This kid came in and he studied at the Kodokan, and they learned different things, but he trained one technique like a million times. And like and I was like, oh, he's like, wow, you guys know a lot of different things. I was like, yeah, we are ready for any situation. I was like, don't you know all these different things? And he's like, no, I really, I'm really, really good at Seoi Nage. And we're like, yeah, sure. And he's like, but I'll get you with Seoi Nage. And I was like, okay. Oh no, he got everyone with that one technique, man. He got you. Like, it doesn't matter how good you thought you were, he'd get you with it. It was just that good. And one of the things that popped up is early on in MMA, I'm dating myself here, but in the early MMA movement, like when the UFC first started, you had these guys, and there was like one guy who ran in with like one glove, one boxing glove, and then one bare hand because he wanted to be able to grab with one hand and punch a boxing glove with the other. It was wild. And what happened was that they started to find out that anybody that was too extreme didn't do well. Like if you were really wild and doing this over here or that over there. But what they did start to notice was there was a certain set of fundamental principles that started working really well. And as MMA evolved, you started getting, all right, well, you need to have a certain level of wrestling type technique. And that really is helpful from people taking you down. Jiu-jitsu worked hands down the best on the ground when you guys are fighting on the ground. And for striking, people generally started doing Muay Thai based striking because it was brutally effective. And if you had these different concepts, then you could start dancing with someone else. And certainly now what's pretty cool is that people are pulling out these individual styles again, are able to kind of express themselves because everyone now has that same base. Everyone has some wrestling, has some jujitsu, and has some Muay Thai striking. But then you'll see a guy who comes in and is doing some amazing Taekwondo kicks. You got another guy who's pulling off a capoeira kick every now and then. It's wild because, but you have these, and I'm getting to my point. I will get there eventually.
Okay. I'm a
Yeah,
big fan
yeah.
of
So
stories.
you're right. So, but what you're getting is like you have these fundamental principles, and then you get to this point where you're able to navigate. And I think that like what I'm starting to see as I'm synthesizing all of the personal finance information that I'm learning on my podcast is there's a certain set of core principles. Like, and if you can, don't spend more than you make. I mean, that sounds like like it might be not be some revolutionary thing, but it's a pretty damn good advice. If you want to be building toward wealth, you got to figure out ways to maybe, or flip that around to make more than you spend. If you don't want to, kind of cramp your lifestyle, well, then you need to find ways to make more money. And
Yeah.
if you're not making much, you need to find ways to spend less. Those are essentially kind of the same thing. You have to create a larger margin. The concepts like that are things that, can help people. Those are one of the techniques that you need to write your financial ship, whatever it might be. But, it's like, I feel like it's not magical or mystical, but there's are these concepts. And then once you figure that out, you can paint your own picture.
I'm gonna forget like 40 of the things that I was thinking of responding with
I'm so
as I was
sorry.
listening to you talk, like, that's just the way my brain works. Um, but I think the big thing is a lot of what I found is a lot of the personal finance textbooks. Well, let me back up. There's a set of core principles that every financial analyst will tell you that you should subscribe by, and it's literally, um save enough to have an emergency fund so that you have like 2, 3 months of, savings just in case something bad happens.
Yeah.
Second one is pay your credit cards off at the end of every month. Never carry credit 1 month to another. So it's okay to use your credit card, but you just don't wanna leave a outstanding balance at the end of the month.
Yeah.
And then it's just about investing, and as soon as you get into investing, it's like you really should be focused on investing 10 to 15% of your, monthly income towards your retirement. And then
Yeah.
if there's anything left over, you know, it's kind of up to you and what your personal situation is. But those are like the 3 core principles, and you hear everybody regurgitate those things over and over and over and over again. And what I've found is a couple of things. The first one is, like, there's nobody really talking to college students about what are some of the things that you need to be focused on in terms of building your earning capacity, right?
Yes.
So we go to college and we all think that it's going to lead to this like big career and tons of money. And in actuality, you can very easily just go to college and it just not lead to anything more meaningful
100%.
than what you could have done had you just dropped out of high school. And so, like, I spend a lot of time telling students, like, man, you're at this age where you can really sort of like craft who you're going to become. And you can, like, I'm never going to tell you that you should go out and try to be rich, but you should go out and you should try to find a career that's super meaningful to you. Um, and there's a lot of power, like, you're at a stage in life where you have a lot of control over that because a lot of people, when they get excited about personal finance, they're deep into their careers or
Yeah.
they're sort of much later on in the life cycle, and they don't really have as much control over that first component, which is how much you're gonna make, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, there's just, like, this untapped, uh, market of college students that need that information. So I applaud you for recognizing that first half, which is like a lot of the personal finance textbooks are really dedicated to, hey, you really have to control your spending, and that's true.
Right.
But man, it's like it would be so cool to talk to people when they're at a stage in life where they have so much control over how much they're going to make the other side of the equation.
Right.
And their superpower is that they're already generally poor,
Yeah.
and so if you could just like establish that baseline, it's just like, look, if you know how to live off a top ramen for a while, like, why not just continue that? Like, as your
Yeah.
earning power goes up, a lot of us will just start spending more. And so it's like, man, if you can learn how to like increase your earning power, find a career that you're really excited about, and sort of like maintain a reasonable spending habit, man, it's just like sky's the limit.
Right.
Sky's the limit. Yeah.
The this is something that I had in my career, like, when I was, and as I am still writing my financial ship, and,
Same
like,
here. Same
that is
here.
something that I'm working on, but it was
Yeah.
part of it is because people didn't have these conversations with me. I remember in college, one of the things too is, like, I remember in college when I changed my major a bunch of times. And never once in the conversation did anyone talk to me about the earning potential of each job. Like, I was like, well, maybe I'll do this. And like, that's a great major. You can feel this and help this and do this. And then I was like, well, how about this one? Oh, well, that's a great major. You can work here, you can do this. Never once did anyone say, and this is how much money you're making. It's like it would have informed, and maybe I would have still jumped around and still looked at different options because for me it was about passion. But like one of the things that I think that we can realize, I have this conversation with my daughter all the time. You can study anything you want. You can
Yeah.
be anything you want in reason. I'm gonna probably push back on some things, you know, but at the same time, learn how to make money with it, because you can be, I hate the whole, oh, he's starving artist. You know what? I know a lot of artists that make a ton of money, but you just have to know how to do the business of it, or I've met doctors who've been miserable. But, it's like it's about finding that balance between passion and earning. I have friends that are doctors that are wonderfully fulfilled people and are making a ton of money. And it's like, it's about simply finding that balance. Can you, figure out a way to finish your degree and make money from it? But at the same time, I think this is one of the things that we're dealing with a bit of a, um, I see these videos on Facebook and TikTok that starts making fun of Gen Z and some of the majors they have. And I feel like that's unfair as well. Because, you know, I feel like maybe people though aren't having the conversations that we're talking about. Oh, you are majoring in this degree. Well, that's interesting. That's powerful that you feel that this is something that needs to be explored and talked about and looked at. But did anyone talk to you about, okay, you've got that major, how are you going to make money with it? Because I mean, that's a
Yeah.
disservice as well. Like we're letting kids take all these student loans and then they're like, and yet, you can't make money. Like my major was really history, right? And like I love
No,
history.
that's the example I use all the time, right?
It's awesome. Like I mean, super cool. I studied the history of the Peloponnesian Wars. I studied ancient philosophy in Europe. And I mean, like I have great perspectives on things. My teacher taught me how to think. Best professors I ever had. I left
Yeah.
school and I was like, yeah, I've got this history major. I can do so much. Yeah, yeah, no, it wasn't. But yet my friend, he was a history major and he had a plan. He studied martial arts with me. He finished up and he was like, hello, CIA. He passed away and now I can say he worked for the CIA because he passed away. But you know what? Such a cool career, man. He was like telling me all the time about, like, he didn't disclose anything, but he's like, I love my job, and his skills
He
at research. Go ahead.
Did he share with you did you guys ever dive into the core differences about how you approached college that was maybe a contributing factor? Because
Yeah.
I definitely have something to say on that
I
issue,
want
but
to
I
I
would
want to
just
hear
be
what
curious.
we did talk about that. And I want to hear what you have to say, then I'll pipe in a little bit too.
So so, um, so I spend a lot of time trying to convince students that so let me back up. I teach accounting, and most of the kids that take my classes are business administration majors.
Yeah.
And so I will tell my students, look, business administration, it's too broad. It's a major that doesn't really provide you any skill. And so
Yeah.
when you graduate, it's really hard for you to market yourself to companies when you sort of took like the easiest path that you possibly could have. As an
Right.
employer, I'm a little reluctant to give you an opportunity if I don't know that you know how to critically think. So I tell a lot of my students, if you do feel like you want to go into the business world, like why not major in accounting? Because that's a skill that you can use to find a job, no problem when you graduate.
Right.
And then like I'm not telling anybody to be an accountant for the rest of their life, but I'm at least saying it's a way for you to get your foot in the door. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's usually my main message to most of my students is like develop a skill in college.
Yeah.
But then there's like 80% of the students that are like, "Yeah, fuck that. I'm not doing that anyway." Like, there's no way I can't even handle your accounting class, not to mention another 5 to 6 or even 12, like, it's just not in the cards. I'm gonna stick with business administration. And so I instead of just saying, "Okay, that kid is like a complete it's a total waste of time. The major is not gonna lead to anything." I spent a lot of time, like, looking into what is it that employers are looking for from
Right.
college graduates? And is it like, does the school that you go to matter? Does your major matter? And what I found is a lot of studies will point to like three things. Like if you do these three things in college, the chances of you landing a good job, maybe like the CIA or a meaningful job, um, is three things. First one, most important, is you got to get an internship, right? So employers
Yes.
understand that no matter what your major is, like, you don't know shit when you graduate, and you're gonna have to
100%.
learn everything practical within that career on the job. And so, like,
Yeah.
we wanna know that you already have the capability of, working in teams, being told what to do,
Yeah.
understanding kind of like showing up on time and dressing right and all the basic concepts. So, like, the internship while you're going to college, super important. Then the next
Yeah.
one is having a mentor, like having somebody. It doesn't have to be a teacher, it could be a counselor, but somebody that can just like you can use to bounce ideas off of and who could help you identify opportunities. And then the third one is getting involved in like school projects, like big school projects,
Yes.
not just like a paper from a particular class, but kind of taking some of the concepts that you learn in your accounting class combined with what you're learning in your econ class, or maybe what you've learned in your business law class, and using all of those, disciplines to try to solve problems. So, like, those were the three things that I usually convince my students to pursue. The internship being the most important. And so, going back to kind of your story, right? So if I was talking to you when you were a history major, I would have said, listen, like, the opportunities within your profession, like if you choose to go maybe teach history at a university, like, you're not going to be making a whole lot of money, right?
Hmm.
It's a great job and it's super meaningful, but like the
Yeah.
opportunities to make a ton of money are pretty limited. So 4 things, right? Really 2 things. 1, you gotta make sure you do the college experience the right way. You can't just be getting drunk at fraternity parties on Friday nights. You gotta do the internships, mentoring, and
Right.
projects. But then the second thing is, like, you can become a millionaire by only making a small amount of money. And
Yeah.
just as equally, you can go broke if you make a lot of money. So, like, just approach your degree the right way and make your college experience like work for you and learn a little bit about personal finance. And then, like, go on your merry way. And then maybe just the last thing, like, one of the most so I was a terrible high school student. Like, I don't know how much of my background you know, but I'm a high school dropout. I ran with the wrong set of kids. I was, like, terrible in school, and so I dropped out of high school, and just to s the school thing was just really not for me whatsoever, and, I came back to, a a an employer was trying to convince me to go to a community college to take a horticulture class so that I could learn a little bit about plants and planting so that I could manage the crew day to day at work. And that, like, set me
Hmm.
off on like the most amazing, profound journey. But the major itself, like, I no longer think it really matters. And I feel like I'm living proof of it. And I have tons of students that are equally becoming very successful, and they're just kind of majoring in whatever and going to whatever school. And I think it really gets down
Yeah.
to, are you passionate about, and are you buying into the process? And so anyway, that was
I
a
love
long
that.
response. Again, I would still love
No,
to
it's a
hear
perfect
what
response.
you and your buddy decided was the was the distinguishing factor maybe between the two of you.
Mindset. It was all mindset. Like, I just finished a class and I had to learn that mindset a different way. My friend, what was it? There was that quote. I was talking to my wife about that quote. Good times, I can never remember the quote correctly, but hard times build strong people build good times. You know, I grew up in a very easy life, and I didn't feel the urgency or the need to put in that effort because everything had been provided for me. Everything was simple, everything was easy. And I just was there to experience. I wasn't partying and getting crazy, but I was studying and I was deep into Eastern philosophy and, I wanted to be Zen. And for me, I would have just preferred to walk off into the sunset, like, Kung Fu TV show or something, that was me.
Yeah.
And it's like, problem is like, there wasn't an understanding of why things were important or why things were urgent or why things needed to be done a certain way. I'm teaching at a university as well. And it was my alma mater, and I really appreciate it, like teaching there. But the students just phone in these, like my students, like I'm teaching an intro to podcasting class, and it was asynchronous, and I will never, never teach another asynchronous class again because, you know, when I teach a class and I'm there in person, I bring it. I will let my students know that if you don't show up in the work world, you will get fired. If you have your own business and you don't step up, your business will go under. Like I had one kid yesterday who was bringing in as many assignments. Teacher, can I get this? Can I do this? Can I still get this in? And I was like, sure, man. I'm not going to fail you because I think it's criminal to charge that much for a class and then to fail someone. Like that to me is not cool. But do
I hear you.
understand that if you were my employee, I would have fired you months ago, and that's the reality.
Yeah. Yeah. So dude, you would have been the prime employee, like, let me back up. You would have been the prime college graduate to hire, right?
Right.
So think about it from an employer's perspective. Like, an employer just wants to make sure that when you come and work, you're gonna be able to add value, like, hopefully
Yep.
sooner rather than later. And so you gotta find people who are passionate about what they're doing and know how to
Yeah.
critically think. And the history majors, man, you can't get through that experience without learning how to critically think about the world. And you're worldly as well. And had you just like gone through the process just the right way, right? Just imagine how different your world would have been. And so, like, the
100%.
fact that you're here sharing your story to me, it's like a very profound thing because it's not really about what the major is and
Yep.
what the career opportunities are. It's about just doing it the right way.
Right. Well,
Not to
let me
say
ask you this.
not to say that the major, like, if you wanted to go into computer science, it's probably hard to go into computer science with a history degree, right? So there has
Right.
to be some correlation depending on what your ultimate goal is, but for the vast majority of people who don't fucking have any idea what they're gonna do for the rest of their life, like,
100%.
at least just do the few things that lead to something meaningful or rewarding.
Right. And that's the thing, and like maybe again coming back to those principles that we're talking about, and like if we taught those fundamental principles of personal martial arts finance, and like we trained people to have those fundamental concepts, like okay, you need to do this. So either in life you're going to need to spend less, or you're going to need to learn to make more, and maybe do both. But if you can know that and say, okay, you know what? I want to be a high school English teacher. Oh, cool. That's rad. And I applaud that. Here's what you
Yeah,
need to know about that. Like A, you're going to have that job and you're going to need to learn to spend less. Or B, you're going to need to position yourself to get into a better school district that pays higher. Or C, you're going to have that job and be okay with that and then learn to get a side hustle, and then you'll be where you want to be financially. Those are
yeah.
all things that you can do, but you have to have the concepts to be able to get to that understanding of that.
There's obviously way more than 2 groups of people, but
Right.
there's one group of people who have no understanding about what the core principles are, which is what you're
Yeah.
talking to right now. And for the most part, you know, they're going to learn that at some point in their life, hopefully
Yep.
through your podcast or my book or something,
Right.
will touch more people.
Yeah.
What I usually tell a lot of the people that are being exposed to the material that it's like, okay, here's the deal. Two things. I know what it's like to, or I've struggled with my weight my entire life. And I
Yeah.
know that the secret to maintaining a decent weight is you burn more calories than you consume, right?
100%.
And for whatever reason, I am just not able to do that. Like, I don't have the discipline to, like, consume less calories than I'm supposed to. But for whatever reason, when it comes to personal finance and, like, saving and investing, like, that gene I have. I know how to spend less than I make, right? It's really not rocket science, like, it's more so the group that's exposed to these concepts, the first one is, okay, it's really not anything more complicated than just spending less than you make. That's the first thing, and establishing the only way that you're gonna be good at that is if you're disciplined and you kinda pay attention to that. But the second thing that I found is that investing, like taking that very first step, right? So, okay, I see the power of compound interest. I know I
Yeah.
want to invest. Everybody gets overwhelmed about how to get started with that. Like a
Right.
lot of the students that I talk to, they'll come back to me after the discussion about you show them a lot of the stuff that Dave Ramsey does with like, "Hey, here's a guy who started investing when he was 22, and here's another guy who started investing when he was, like, 28. And the kid who invested starting at 22, he only contributes 16,000, and the kid who starts at 27 does it his whole life. The kid who started earlier wins, he ends up with more." Like,
Yep.
everybody understands that, but it's like they come back to my office and they're like, "Dude, I don't even know how to fucking pick between a Roth IRA, a traditional
Mm.
IRA, if I should use Robinhood, get a basic account." Like, it's so overwhelming for somebody to just get started that that's really where the real work comes, is like, what do I do to get started? Like, if you were to ask
Yeah.
anybody who has not reached their financial goal, right? The number one common trait amongst all of those individuals is they never got started
Yes.
because getting
That was
started is so
exactly.
overwhelming.
And sometimes they don't even know the right questions to ask. Like I'm setting up. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna share a little bit of a thing here. I'm working on setting up my first business, setting up. And I'm doing the research about LLC, sole proprietorship, or S corp, and I don't even know the questions to ask. And I've been leaning on ChatGPT, which I don't know if that's great or not. It's helped me a lot finding out information and teaching me the questions to ask. But when you don't even know the questions to ask, how do you get started? And I think that's a disservice that we're doing to people is we're not teaching them what questions should I be asking? Like, someone like, and you are even a step beyond where some of the students I have are at. Like yours are asking these questions. What's the difference between a Roth IRA? But what about like what is investing? And that's one of the things that like I had someone come on my podcast and they were like, "Sean, I love how you make these concepts really simple and dumb for people." And I'm like, because that's me. I am dumb. That's me. That's so many people. Like,
Yeah.
we want to think that
Yeah.
everyone knows the questions, knows the goals they should have, but sometimes we're not even having the right conversations to get them there.
And it's different for every person, right? So
Right.
everybody has their own goals, they're in their own financial situation, like, before they get started, they have some baggage with them, some good, some bad, and so
Right.
it's so complicated to, like, from that person's perspective to digest all the information that's out there, and it could be totally overwhelming, and
Yeah.
yeah, I totally appreciate what I don't know what the solution is, but I do appreciate
Well,
the
let me
fact
ask
that
you this
that
question.
you are. identifying the right
Let me ask you,
questions to at least
right? Sorry, I interrupted you there. Well, let me ask you this way. I got so excited to ask you this question that I kind of cut you off there. I'm sorry about that. Now, what's something
it's
about
okay.
money that no one ever taught you, but you wish they had?
Something about money that nobody taught me that I wish they had. Um, oh, man, that is a
Right?
very good question. So I was probably 23 or 24, and somebody showed me a spreadsheet about with the compound interest, like, "Hey, what happens if you're 23, 24, and you were to invest $3,000 a year for just, like, 3 or 4 years? How much would you have when you graduate or, like, when you retired?" And it was just like a simple one-page spreadsheet, and it had, like, contributions of 9,000, and then at the end, based on the assumptions in on this page, there was like $1,000,000 at the end. And I remember thinking like, "Man, this is so profound because like 3,000 a year isn't a whole lot." And
Yeah.
and having 1,000,000 when I retire is just like that's kind of freedom. And so I remember when I was
Yeah.
looking at that document, I was like, "Boy, I can go out and I can do whatever I want. Like, I don't really have to stress out about what I'm gonna do for a living." Like, at the time, I was working in construction, landscaping, and I was just like, "Man, I could really do anything. I don't even have to go to college if I don't want to."
Right.
And it was like this really liberating thing. But what they didn't show me was exactly what I was just telling you about, which is like, okay, well, how do I put this concept
Yes.
of, like,
Yes.
compound interest and investing, like, how do I do that?
Yeah.
Where do I go? Like, what account do I open? How do I how do I get my money into that account? Like, nobody was around to give me that real practical advice about, like, how do you actually do this? And, like, how do you open up a brokerage like, what is a brokerage account? And, like, what's
Right.
a stock and what's a so, like, I think a lot of the stuff that you're alluding to is what I wish somebody would have given me. So, like, what I spend a lot of my time doing with students is trying to inspire students,
I love
right?
that.
Because there's no way that I'm gonna be able to teach everything about personal finance or accounting, but what I wanna do is at least inspire somebody to, like, continue the journey after our time ends. And so, I spend a lot of time inspiring students, but not a lot of time with the practical nuances. And so, like, my big suggestion to most people would be, like, take a class. Like,
Yeah.
take a basic personal finance class because there is so much information in the world that is so overwhelming, and it's
Right.
so most of it not most of it, but a lot of it is so terrible. Like, the advice is just terrible.
Yeah.
Like, just even
Especially on
should I
social
use
media.
Robinhood? Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So, like, just like like Robinhood as an example, it's, like, such a powerful tool for somebody who's 20 years old where you can take the inspiration of compound interest and having millions when you retire, and you can put it you can start investing immediately with Robinhood. But the problem is with Robinhood is that, like, they make their money, or at least they did when they first started, by encouraging you to enter into transactions. So the more that
Yeah.
you buy and sell, the more money Robinhood makes. And so they're constantly bombarding you with messages about the hot stocks at the moment, and that's such bad advice. I mean, the
Yeah.
fact that a kid is, like, using Robinhood, it's such a profound thing for somebody at 20 years old to be doing, to save and invest, and it's like, sorry for the language, but fuck, you should just be doing it the right way, like, come
Yeah.
on. So my big advice would be take a class from somebody who's just gonna, like, they're not gonna try to sell you anything. They're not trying to,
Yeah.
like, gain followers. They're simply trying to deliver the basic information with no preconceptions. So take that class and learn how to apply all of the concepts to your particular financial situation. Take a class. It's like
Right.
big my big push.
I love that because it's like I saw this video online of these kids that were learning this martial arts, and they were doing this one drill, and it was like really weird technique that they were doing. I think that they were definitely preparing for a sport martial art, not a practical martial art. Like they were doing this thing and they were running
Yeah.
forward and flailing their hands and legs around. And it was interesting because all I saw was like, this kid is going to get knocked out if he gets into a real fight. It's not practical.
Yeah.
And why I
Yeah.
bring that up is because,
Yeah.
you know, you're going to have these different things that are like, if you're running out and following the advice of a teacher that is not, you want to defend yourself, get into a good class with a good teacher. And it doesn't have to be flashy, it just needs to work,
Yeah.
you know? And it's interesting because
Yeah.
when I go back to like, if I ask myself the same question, what's something about money that no one ever taught you? I just kept coming back to the thing that what I wish people had talked to me about was that we all get old. We will all get sick. And at that time, because when you're young, you just don't think about that. You're setting aside, I don't need to
Yeah.
save anything. I don't
Totally.
need this or that. And like, yet the reality is that all of us are on a time frame. My wife is a singer, and we were talking about some other singers and some actresses that she interacts with in her career. And sometimes there's a degree of we question why people make certain decisions. And I was reframing things yesterday for her, and I said, everyone has a window, a career earning window. And for some jobs, it's much shorter than others. You think about a football player or, a musician, that window, unless they're like, man, you too or something, it's much shorter than other things. Like there are
Yeah.
very few musicians or actors or athletes that stay around. That LeBron James is not your norm. Like that guy's amazing that he's been able to have such a long career. Most guys, they get into the league 2 or 3 years, and then it's done. And then what are you doing after that?
Yeah.
You know, for all of us
Yeah.
though, we have that
Yeah.
window, and like that urgency. I wish that again, if I could go back to university and tell myself something, Sean that wanted to sit there and walk off into the sunset, man, that's great. But there's going to be a time where you've got kids
It's
and you gotta make
yeah.
changes
So it's yeah, so I don't know how old you are, but I'm 56. And to me, like a a 1-year period, it's like it goes by so fast, right? Life is just flying by for me now.
yeah
And like
yeah
I think as you get older, your concept of time totally changes. Okay, so for
yeah
me 5 years from now, that's like that again, that's not really that far away. But when you're 20 and you're thinking
yeah
about 5 years from now, like, that's a fucking eternity. Sorry for swearing,
yeah
but
no, you're fine.
that's an eternity. And so, like, it's not really about again, it's not really about sharing the information because everybody sorta gets it, but, like, those kids who are 20, they don't just need to hear, "Hey, you should start investing, and this is what's gonna happen." It's just like, you somehow need to convince them that the window starts right now. It doesn't
Right
start
now.
5 years from now or 10 years from now, and it's like, what is it that how do you explain it or how do you present it to somebody who's 20 to actually inspire them to to move through all of the complication of just getting started? Because it's like, man, I've got 45 years. Like, I'm really gonna start investing now, and I'm not gonna get anything until 45 years from now when I retire. Like, yeah, and then so then maybe they, like, open up a web page, and it has a brokerage account, and then they're faced with these decisions about what type of account they wanna open, and they're, like, totally overwhelmed, and they're like, "Nah, yeah," and before you know it, they're like 5 years has gone past, and they haven't really done anything, so it's like,
Yes.
it's not just about sharing the information, it's about, like, how do you share it in a way that will get people to move to do something at that age?
Right.
Because
I
you and
I
there's a certain sense of panic that's already set in
Yep.
for us, like, I'm
Yep.
gonna be okay, but I still panic, and
Yeah.
you just don't have that same sense of urgency when you're younger, and so how do you
Right.
get somebody to get motivated about it is like a question I struggle with all the time.
What's one money habit anyone can start today, even if they feel broke or they're not doing they feel like they can't?
So I'll give you 2. The first one is, to me, I say no to everything, right? So again, like, I can't say no to french fries, but I could say no to, "No, I'm not gonna get the larger popcorn because it's only 25 cents more." Like, so just
Yeah.
say no to, like, the whole world is out to steal from us, and so, like,
Yeah.
for me, when I say no, I'm not really depriving myself of anything. What I'm doing is I'm choosing to invest in my own hopes and dreams. Like, I want
Yeah.
my money working for me, not for somebody else. And so I constantly say no to everything as much as I possibly can. That's the first rule. And then the second one that you've touched on quite a bit, actually, in many of your other podcasts, and I guess I'll just echo what I've heard others say,
Uh-huh.
is creating a spending habit, right? So like, I'm never going to wake up and look at myself in the mirror and be like, "Okay, the goal today is to be a total loser," right? Like, that's not something I'm gonna do. Nobody's gonna do that. So, if your goal is to go retire and live on a beach in Mexico, but yet you're spending, excessive amounts of money on Starbucks coffee and going out to lunch and dinner most nights every week, and spending money lavishly on clothes that maybe you don't need. Like, to me, that's not winning, right? Like,
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
your priority, your goals, your hopes and dreams are inconsistent with your day-to-day actions. And to me, that's like being a loser. You're losing. You're losing the game.
Yeah.
You're lying to yourself. And so to me, as god awful as it sounds, like creating a, if you wanna call it a budget, you can call it a budget. If you wanna call it a spending plan, you could call it a spending plan. But sitting down and paying attention to how you actually spend your money is,
Yeah.
like, I make students do that in one of my classes, and every single student comes back with the same reaction, which is, "Oh my god, I can't believe how much I'm spending on food
Right.
every month," right? So, it just, little things here and there, sort of add up. And so to really be honest and to make sure that our day-to-day habits are consistent with our hopes and dreams, you really have to be conscious of how you're spending money. It starts there. Has to start there.
Love that. Well, my brother, that is the
Eh,
mic drop
Kinda,
moment
if I
right
could just
there.
add one more,
Please do.
if I could just add one. So I personally love budgeting. I'm like the one guy who loves budgeting, but most people don't like budgeting. And so, like, an easy hack to budgeting, like, the whole goal with budgeting is to, like, find that gap you were talking about very early on, where this is your earnings and this is your spending. The more that you can widen that and take that and invest it, the better off you're gonna be. So you don't even have to budget. Okay. What you should do is just get into a concept where you're paying yourself first. So you get paid and just start off with something. Maybe start off with 5% of your paycheck and just put that aside. And then whatever's left over, fucking spend it however you want. And then if the end of the month you're like, well, it's pretty easy. Okay, next month, maybe just take 7, 8% and set it aside. And so, like, who cares what you're spending your money on? It could be
Yeah.
Starbucks, it could be going out, it could be clothes, it could be whatever. But as long as you are setting aside that, the goal really is 10 to 15%, like, who cares where everything else goes? So
Love that.
get in the habit of paying yourself first, get in the habit of saying no, and get in the habit of, like, getting started.